I'm Clint Hawking, and I'm the creative director on Far Cry 2. A lot of developers set out to make immersion one of the core components of their game. They really focus a lot of their effort on, great graphics and really good sound and realization, trying to make the game as immersive as possible so the player can feel really a part of the world. And on Far Cry 2, we did all of that with our dynamic weather system and gorgeous open world, all that stuff. But what was more important for us was to immerse the player in the physicality of his avatar, to make him really feel like he is physically embodied in that world. So then he really feels the weather around him. He really feels the day and night cycle. He really feels like he's walking through these open savanna plains. He feels his physical presence in the world. Obviously, weapons are a really important part of Far Cry 2, and we really worked hard to make sure not only do we have sort of really punchy, firing and reload animations, but we also wanted to make sure that as the weapons degrade over time, you get to see the shaders become rustier and dirtier and muddier, and when the weapons jam and malfunction, you need to clear those jams, and you need to actually struggle with the weapon a little bit as it gets older. Eventually, you keep the weapon for too long, you keep using it even though it's worn out, it'll just blow up in your hand. So all of that's in service of really making the player feel a physical connection with the guns upon which his survival depends so heavily. Also, if you've got a 50 square kilometer open world, that means vehicles are really important, and we put the same amount of effort in making sure all of our vehicle animations were just as immersive and just as physical as all of our other animations. That means anytime you get in a vehicle, anytime you get out, switch seats, move on to a mounted weapon, all of those animations are quick and fluid, but they're all animations. We're not teleporting the camera ever, so you always feel like you're in your own body in the game. On top of that, vehicles can break down, just like weapons. They wear down, they break down, and eventually they'll stop running. You'll have to get out of the vehicle, pop open the hood, repair the engine, and then get back on the road. The player's most important navigational tool is his map and his compass and his monocular. And of course, we wanted to make sure that the player has that map in his hand rather than having to look at it in a menu. That means that the player can check his position at any time, he can navigate the world, he can see where he needs to go, see where his objectives are in the world using a paper map that he holds in his physical hands in the game world. Healing is another important way that we create a visceral connection between the player and his avatar. When you have a small wound, all you need to do is inject a thread into yourself and you're good to go. But when you get a critical wound, you need to stop and perform first aid on yourself, and that can mean anything from pulling a piece of shrapnel out of your arm to, relocating a dislocated wrist or elbow or shoulder or all three. Again, the idea is to give the player that visceral punch that gives him a powerful connection between his own body and the body of the avatar. And that's really what immersion is about in Far Cry 2. It's about forging that bond between the player and the avatar, and about creating that same bond between the avatar and the world so that the player really feels like they themselves are walking around in that 50 square kilometers of open African savanna, free to explore it however they choose.